Good morning, everybody. It's Jean here, Jean Truelove from Truelove Quilts for You. As you can see, I have flying geese around my Jean's Block Party 2021 quilt, my Dear Jean quilt. My sampler quilt that I've been working on, bit by bit by bit. It's growing now and again. I am feeling better. It's been a while since I had my nasty fall. I'm not 100% yet, but I am getting better. I'm taking it slowly but surely. It was not very nice, but thank you again. I keep thanking you so very much for your kind words. I really appreciate it. But yeah, our quilt has lifted me, as somebody said, out of the COVID doldrums. Yeah, it's been a nice diversion, and don't we need it? Things are going on still here in the state of Pennsylvania. It's getting old, but as we're getting old, right? But yeah, it'll be okay. So we'll just keep safe and take care of each other and ourselves. This is my quilt so far, and as you know, I have been doing my flying geese this time up here. I'm putting my borders on. I really like the fact that I chose the gray and white dot again around the very outside. My original pattern, or my idea, was to put the black and white stripe around my flying geese. Again, my quilt has evolved. When I got to this point, I thought, nah, I don't want the black and white strip. I believe I'll put the black and white strip as an outside border, to border the whole thing. But when you're auditioning fabric or choosing fabric, and I have the privilege of being able to just go shopping in my room with my extensive stash that I've had for years, I can sort of audition different fabrics, and I really liked this white and gray polka dot, or the gray and white large polka dot, to really border both sides of my flying geese. I really quite like that. And again, I think you have to step away from your quilt and see, as it is evolving, if you don't have a pattern, and see where the fabric is taking you. Now, obviously, if you've bought a certain amount of fabric and you have a very small stash, then you're married to those choices, which is awesome, because if you chose the fabric, you love the fabric, okay? And it's going to work no matter what. But if you have the opportunity to maybe get a half a yard or something more, or you get to a store and you see a fabric you like, that's where the beauty of creating your own project comes into it. That's the whole point. That was the whole exercise that I was trying to encourage even beginner quilters to be able to even maybe take a pattern and not be so rigid, and step outside of the comfort zone, as I always say. Not that you don't want to do things precisely. I did a 24.5-inch unfinished block. I did 4 12.5-inch unfinished blocks, and I will have done however many 6.5-inch blocks. And they were pretty much my ta-da moment. I used my rulers. I did everything pretty good. My sashings along the way, I've cut at 1.5 inches, although I'll admit it, my outside board, my border up here, my gray and white dot to border my flying geese, I was tired. I'm like, I cut all these strips at 1 3/4. I say, oh, I'm going to cut them at 1.5. And I looked at it, and as I was cutting, I'm thinking, these seem a little bit wide. Quilters know how big things are, right? I can go into a ruler and pretty much find the 2-inch marker. I was tired. I cut all these at 1 3/4. So what? I kept them. I wasn't about to cut them down. I kept them. And so when it comes to putting my other blocks around, I have to jiggery-pokery something. Maybe make a sashing a little bit wider. That's fine. That's what I mean. And especially the beauty of a medallion quilt is each side is exactly the same. But coming to that, I believe I touched on it in one of my last videos. This is going to be a decent sized quilt because I put my sashing in it and everything. And it's 72 inches square right now. 72 inches. That's a nice sized quilt. But square quilts are awesome to a certain extent. But if you want to have a rectangular quilt on a bed, you obviously need it longer than you do wider. And I believe, again, I touched on this, There's no reason, say you want just a 72-inch wide quilt, but you want a 95-inch or 100-inch tall quilt. Well, there's no reason at this point, if you got to this point in any project, that you couldn't put a border on the top and a border on the bottom. You're not married to the fact that, oh, I need to put borders on all sides of a quilt. Not at all. Not at all. In this case, if you wanted to do, say, a row of 9 patches just across the top, just make a bunch of 9 patches, boot, whack them on the top there with a little bit of sashing, whack them on the bottom there with a little bit of sashing. Your quilt has grown by a foot, by 12 inches or so, something like that, once with the seam allowance or whatever it is. But and then you can add another border on top of that, maybe just a solid fabric. What I'm saying is, again, you can mess about with your own quilt. You can mess about with your own project. Oh, I always say, this is just fabric. And I get that it's expensive. I understand that, and you don't want to mess up. Absolutely, absolutely. And fabric is precious. But the process shouldn't be precious. The process shouldn't be so rigid that you're frightened to come in your sewing room because you've messed up. That defeats the whole purpose, especially in these stressful times. We're supposed to go to our room, our corner, our table, our desk, our machine, our little cutting station, and enjoy it. Step away from the stress of the day and go, oh, I'm gonna stroke some pretty fabric and put it together. So I hope that at the end of the day, this process has given you that little bit of freedom away from a rigid quilting structure. Although, again, as I say, patterns and measurements should be precise, as I have explained in all of my tutorials. My quilt, as I say, measures 72 inches wide. I will be growing this. I'm going to be putting more sampler blocks around the edge, around the 4 corners. The hard part is done. The hard part of this quilt is done. The Dresden plate, the applique, and the Flying Geese. That was a little bit of a marathon right there. I know that you people have had projects on the go and have been interrupted. So to get to this point, if you had, very, very well done. The next few tutorials, I'm going to go back to square one, and myself, I'm going to be making a few more, and videoing it, a few more sampler blocks, okay? Just some more skill, some more technique, some more methods of creating blocks for the basic seamstress, for the basic quilter, I should say. That does not mean I'm going to be making a million more sampler blocks. I will, for the 4 sides, I don't know how many blocks I need, with my sashing, I will punctuate quite a few of them with 9 patches and with a simple 4 patch. Absolutely. I'm not going to be, this is not going to go on for the next decade. I want to get my quilt. I'm not rushing it. I'm not rushing the process, but I want to get it done. Which brings me to the fact, if you have done this, you can finish right now. This is a beautiful size quilt if you've made this, and you want to go out gardening in the summertime, and you're busy with the kids in the summertime. By all means, if you're doing it, you can stop a quilt at any time. If you had just made that, that's a lovely little table topper. If you had just made this, that's a little quilt over a sofa. If you're making this at the foot of the bed or on a day bed or something. So you can just stop. You don't have to continue on. You can just, at this point, I could just bind that, right? And I have a nice, lovely quilt. I'm going to be making it bigger. Now, I don't know how big it's going to be. 92, 94, 96, 80, I don't know how big it's going to be. It's going to be whatever it is. However, I do want to, if you haven't already, and I believe, hopefully I will have addressed it in the very beginning of our block party, our introduction, about pre-washing fabric. Many of you are pre-washers. You pre-wash everything. You can pre-shrink a batting in a hot dryer. You can pre-shrink cotton because it will shrink. My quilt, I do not pre-wash fabric. My quilt will shrink. Absolutely. It may shrink a couple of inches. My quilt all shrinks up the same. Well, the stitching, the batting, the thread, the cotton, all will shrink up exactly the same. And then create more of a crinkly effect. I like that look, and I'm not bothered whatsoever. But I will take that into consideration for like a bedding size. So if I know my quilt's going to shrink up a little bit, I may add a bit of a larger border. And that's another thing. If you find out your quilt shrinks, or if you haven't pre-washed and you're making a quilt for a twin size, you want to take into account how big you want it to hang over the bed, because if it does shrink, it's not going to go over perhaps to your bed skirt or your dust ruffle on your bed, if that's the look you want. Just something to keep in mind. And again, I probably will have addressed that. But I'm not bothered. I wash all my quilts at the end of the day with about 6 or 7 color catchers. So this is my quilt. I am going to be growing it. As I said, the worst is done. Yeah, so the tutorial for my Flying Geese, how I put them all together. It was not so daunting. I had said originally that I was going to be making 28 Flying Geese, my idea pattern. It ended up I needed 30, and miracle of miracles, 30, my extra 2 on each side worked perfectly. But I tell you again, do not stress if, oh my goodness, 29 is too much, 30 is too 28 is too little, 29 is too much. I show you how to figure out a Flying Geese border where they will match perfectly. You just add a little hunk of fabric. You don't have to worry about math or anything like that. And I will explain that to you. Again, no sweat. This should be a process which you're enjoying. So again, my measurements here for my 30 Flying Geese, I will have needed to have made 120. If you remember, I had said about 112. Well, we needed 8 more. And that is, I've included a 4.5 inch gray and white cornerstone. I followed the gray and white cornerstones out to the very end here of my Flying Geese units. But again, I explained that to you in the following tutorial. All right, enough of me chatting along. I hope everyone is safe and fine, and the weather here has been glorious, absolutely beautiful. The sun is finally shining, and hopefully on all of our lives we have a little bit of sunshine. And I'm thinking of you guys, and yeah, love from the Trueloves. See ya. Bye. So now I'm going to be making all my Flying Geese border. And as you can see, I've already begun. I've done 2 sets. I had started out by saying you need 28 on each side. I'm not quite sure. Here is my quilt over here. To this point, I've put my dotted borders on it, and I'm going to be putting my Flying Geese around each edge. Okay? I'm not quite sure. I have to get this off my design wall, or my shelving right here. I'm not quite sure if that's 28 or 26 or more. Probably a few more. But I'm going to go check right now. But right now I'm going to show you how I make my Flying Geese. So I've already done 2 strips, and I have actually 14 in each strip. But that's just for demonstration purposes. When you go to make your Flying Geese, you're going to have a whole bunch of them. So on your sewing machine, what you want to do is you want to configure, have all your pile here, and you want to make sure that you're sewing your Flying Geese all going in a row, okay? All going in a row. And hopefully you will have constructed them so you have that 1/4 inch on top, so you don't cut away your points. Remember? See my 1/4 inch? I've cut away. And also, I have pressed these. My last video I was showing you, when I constructed the 4 at a time, how I have pressed my Flying Geese so that my seams go all one way, and then that little dog ear that a lot of people cut off, I don't. That right there, that dog ear does not create a lump. If there is any lump, it would be here in the seam. That dog ear, to me, reinforces this top seam here. I don't want to cut that dog ear away, because remember, as you saw, the way I've pressed them, if you're new here, the way I've pressed them, with my seams going to the dark, that dog ear just goes right straight across. So if I had pressed it that way, I would have had that dog ear standing up like that. And maybe I would have wanted to. But because I've pressed it, everything going to the dark, to the middle, that little triangle goes right to the top there and makes it come straight across, okay? So I've done that on all of them. That's so we have that 1/4 inch seam there, so we don't cut off the points. Don't worry if you've cut off. I cut off a few points here. I'm not bothered whatsoever. But when we go to sew our flying geese into our whole unit here, what you want to do is you want to grab a pile of them, and you want to make sure, again, that we're not putting point nose to nose. We're putting them all in a line, okay? We're putting them all in a line. So what you want to do is you want to have your I do them in sets of 2. I have a whole pile here, and I grab one with my point going to the left, and then I grab it, and I want to sew on the side where I can see that seam. I want to sew where I can see that where that point is right there. So I grab one and I put it pretty side down with the point going this way, right? So then it's when I sew that seam, it's all going the proper way. So pretty sides together, this point going that way, upside down, or the wrong side of the fabric going that way. That way, again, forget this dog ear here and forget that dog ear there. You just want to stitch right down, and you can feel and you can see that point there, the top of that point. So you can feel it. Go slowly. You just go on the top of that and then off. And pretty much it's maybe like a scant 1/4 inch. And as you can see, it will end up that you have not cut off your point. Okay? Because you've sewn it that way. Now, after you sew a whole bunch of them together, what I do is I do sets of 2. I cut them apart, the chains. Then I do sets of 4. I cut them apart, the chains, and then 4 and 4. So they work up very quickly. This is how I've done 14 of them, very quickly actually, and pretty good. My points on here pretty good. This one I cut off a point there. I'm not bothered. But when I go to when they come off my sewing machine, they're all higgledy-piggledy all over the place. What I do then, I do not, but then quote me on this, I do not set my seams. There's too many of them. There is too many of them. But what I do is I either spritz them with water or I use a starch. I do a starch on these, okay? I turn them over, and what I do is I gently start from the very beginning, from the very top here, and I'm just pressing, and I'm ironing all of the seams going all one way. Can you see that? Everything, these little dog ears here, everything is going one way. Beautifully. I've starched it, or I've spritzed it, and I'm just going down, and I tug it just slightly down here. I just tug it. I tug the length, making sure that I'm not creating any tucks, and I'm just pushing everything exactly the same way with my iron. So everything is laying beautifully. And what do I always say? My back almost looks as good as my front. Go right down the length. Now, the reason I've only done 14 is I'm going to show you why I've only done 14. Okay, so there is my back of my flying geese. Okay, turn it over. And you want to keep it as straight as possible. These have, when you're working with a border, it has or especially units like this, it might have a tendency to go just slightly wonky, but you can just sort of stretch that back into shape and press it exactly in a nice straight line. I think that's pretty good. Now, the reason I've done 14 and 14 is this is my 28, okay? This was just again a ballpark figure. Okay, now I'm going to go over and get my actual quilt off of my wall over here, and I'm going to show you an alternative way. Hopefully I won't have to do it that way, but an alternative way if my flying geese don't fit. Now I'm going to go over. Here's my quilt on my table now. I've not pinned anything, or I've just laid it down on my table. Now here are my flying geese units, and as you know, I sewed together 14 flying geese and then another 14 flying geese. Okay, so there's one set of 14 and another set of 14. Now, if I'm just laying this as I would when I'm going to be sewing it. I sewed that together, straighten all this up. I see that my 63-inch square quilt now, 28 is not enough on one side. Okay, 28 is not enough on one side. I need, it looks like 2 more. Again, this is how I do it. So there, look at that. 2 more is exact. So when I go to sew that, actually, I don't like that. I'll put that up there. See what this looks like. Yeah. I'll put this here. Yeah. Just with the design. There you go. So now, once I go to sew that with my 1/4 inch seams and sew it 1/4 inch down my border here, 30 Flying Geese fit my 63 inch square perfectly. Now, if you don't have a 63 inch square, say your 1/4 inch is different, or you've cut things different, how you can make Flying Geese fit is you take out this one. You don't have enough, as it were. What you can do and make a sort of a design feature is starting at the very corner, which is the best way to begin. Starting there on one side of our border. I'm just laying this, but it's pretty good because I've ironed it pretty good. The Flying Geese going one way, and then this is at the end here. You have this area here. You've made your Flying Geese fit perfectly here, and you've made your Flying Geese fit perfectly here. Right here, if you would want as a feature, because now it would be on all 4 sides, you could add a piece of fabric. You could add an additional sashing, little piece of fabric right in there. Just cut it to fit. And then that way you have a feature. Your Flying Geese are looking at something. And you're not worrying about, oh my goodness, my Flying Geese, it's sort of this big. Oh no, what do I do? Or I cut that off, and you're all panicking. Don't panic. Make your Flying Geese fit at the corners, because we are going to be putting a 4 inch by 4 inch, because what's going to happen is we're going to have this row come to there. Okay? And we're going to have a cornerstone in here, right? We're going to have a cornerstone right in there. So don't worry about this on your one side. If you wanted to do your Flying Geese like that, it's very effective. You see that? You see that? It's just meeting. And then you have a feature in the middle. So that's a way to get around making something fit without having to worry about tremendous measurements. So if you wanted to do that, or you could perhaps just add, well, it wouldn't be balanced. You could add 1 more, but then you'd have, say, 14 and 15. So you want 14 and 14, and add a nice piece of fabric in there. Something that's in your quilt. So it's a feature. Okay, I hope you get that. But for me, like, unbelievably, because I did the math pretty good. I started out with 28, but I do need 30. And I'm just going to add that right there. And turn this around, and I know that my Flying Geese meet end to end, like that. My 30 Flying Geese. Oh, it's going to be pretty. You see that? And I'm going to continue my 30 here, and because it's exactly 63, I know that I'm going to put 30 here. I'm going to put 30 along here. So, but that's another way. Don't want you to get your knickers in a twist because you're, oh no, it doesn't fit. You make things fit and then make them a feature of your quilt. Again, stepping out of your comfort zone, but you can do that. You can mess about and not have precise measurements that might throw you off. So knowing that my Flying Geese border matches and is the same exact size of my border, my quilt here, what I've done is I've laid it on carefully without pulling or stretching anything. Again, pretty sides to pretty side. And I have pinned it. So as you can see, I'm stitching right along here, and you can actually sort of see where that seam is, where the point is, so that when you go to stitch it, hopefully, won't make a liar out of me. Yeah, your points on your Flying Geese here won't have been cut off. So I brought my Flying Geese, my stitched on Flying Geese over to my ironing board here, and my seams are all going one way. Now I am going to set this seam here. I am going to carefully, keeping all my seams going the same way, I'm going to set that seam, okay? Now, I could flip that over. Let me just see. I could flip that over to go so that seam goes that way, but it does now create here lumps. It's too much. It's too much for this here, even though they're not lumps, but it's more fabric here than if I actually sort of tuck this seam back under, going towards my sashing. It takes a little bit of fiddling, but I would rather have my seam just set like that. Just set right into my sashing there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of fiddle about with it, and I'm going to tuck that so it goes back towards the sashing. So again, to reiterate what I have done, I'm working on my second border of Flying Geese. I have sewn 2 lots together, and what I've done is I made 15 units, because that's 30. I have some other Flying Geese over there, but I'm just working at one side again. So I've sewn 15 units together of 2 each, right? And now what I'm doing is I just have them to the side, and now I'm chain piecing units of 4, okay? Much easier. Look how quickly it goes. And there, in no time whatsoever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 Flying Geese. Look at that. And the points are pretty good, I must say. So now I'm going to go iron them just like I showed you. I'll put them on my board, I'll straighten them all out, I'll spray that, and I'll just gently push all those seams so they're all lovely and flat. I finished my second row of Flying Geese, and it is important when you're putting your Flying Geese borders on that you realize it's a border, and you're doing 2 sides first, and then you're doing the top, the bottom, and the top again, okay? So I've done that side. Looking at my quilt, that would be my right side. I come over and I'm going to do my left side. But with Flying Geese, also you want to make sure my Flying Geese are going up the right side. They're going to turn the corner. They're going to go from right to left on the top, and then they're coming back down the left side. Okay? And then when I get down to the bottom, they will be going that way. So all my Flying Geese are flying the exact same way around my quilt. I finished my top border, my bottom border, whatever, of my Flying Geese. And as you can see, I've had the configuration going all the way around and to the end there. But I have to make a cornerstone. I have to make a square in here and on here, on this side. Now I'm going to continue my sort of theme of the cornerstones, the gray and white dot. You see that, the gray and white dot going from there to there to there, and then to this corner out of this gray and white fabric here that I have. So now what I've done, again, I've just sort of set up my ruler here and sort of compensating for that 1/4 inch and that 1/4 inch and that 1/4 inch, and I come up with about a 4.5 inch square. I'm going to cut 2, because I need 1 on each end of this top border or bottom border. I'm going to cut 2 a little bit bigger than 4.5 inches. Then I can just trim it off. But you see, that's how I did it. I just figured out. So as you can see, I've put on my top border. I have the gray and white dot Cornerstone here. Now I cut that a little bit bigger. I think I cut it not 5 inches, like 4 3/4 or something. But as you can see, it's hanging over. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to square it up. This is nice and square on my board here, my mat here, and this is nice and square following here and here. And I'm just going to cut off that excess right there, just with the square of my ruler. Cut that off like that, and cut off that like that. So I have a lovely square corner there. There you go. I have a lovely square corner, and it matches my gray Cornerstone there. So I've done that one, and now I just have to do this one. Square this one up a bit, like that, and then I'll do the bottom. I'll do the bottom and the other side too. So just take off that little bit that I cut, like that. So I have a lovely square corner. I've attached the top and the bottom of my Flying Geese border here, and I'm just thrilled the way it turned out. I really am, with the little gray Cornerstones there. And now I'm just looking, and on my original pattern, or my idea, I had thought I was going to probably put a black and white border around the black and white stripe around my Flying Geese, but I'm not going to. As I'm looking at this, I like this large gray and white dot, and so I'm really going to border the Flying Geese on both sides with the gray and white dot.